Chinese billionaire CEO mocked the black waitress in Cantonese. She answered in his dialect, "Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into this incredible story. Imagine this: a glamorous, high-end restaurant in the heart of San Francisco, where the elite gather to make deals, sip expensive wine, and talk business. The place is buzzing with conversations, laughter, and the clinking of fine china. The chandelier overhead sparkles, casting a soft glow on the marble floors as the staff moves swiftly between tables, ensuring everything is perfect. Among the guests is a billionaire CEO, a powerful man who has spent his life building a tech empire. He is seated at the head of the table, surrounded by his business partners, all eager to discuss the next big deal. He's confident, charismatic, and used to getting what he wants. At the far end of the room, the waitstaff moves like shadows, their presence almost invisible to the guests. Among them is Mia, a young black waitress, who, despite her professional demeanor, has always been treated as just another face in the crowd. She wears a crisp white shirt, a black apron, and her hair is pulled back into a neat bun, her eyes focused on her task as she quietly refills glasses and clears plates. Mia has worked at this restaurant for over a year, but tonight, something feels different. As she walks past the billionaire CEO's table, he turns his gaze toward her, his eyes narrowing with a smirk. Without warning, he speaks to her in Cantonese, mocking her in front of everyone at the table. "I bet you don't even understand what I'm saying," he says, chuckling arrogantly, assuming that Mia, like most of the staff, has no idea how to speak his language. The table erupts into laughter, the men around him snickering at his remark, while Mia stands still for a moment, her heart pounding in her chest. But instead of shrinking back, instead of lowering her head in shame, Mia looks the CEO straight in the eye, her expression calm but resolute. She doesn't flinch. Instead, with perfect poise, she replies in flawless Cantonese, her voice steady and controlled. "Actually, I understand every word you said," she says, her gaze never leaving his. The laughter dies down instantly. The room falls silent as the billionaire CEO's smirk fades, replaced by an expression of shock and disbelief. He had assumed that, as a waitress, Mia was beneath him, someone who could be dismissed with a few words in a foreign language. But Mia's response is not just a simple reply. It's a statement that she is more than just a server, that she is a woman of intellect, dignity, and strength. For a moment, no one moves. The guests around the table exchange surprised glances, unsure of how to react. The CEO, his face now flushed with embarrassment, opens his mouth to say something, but the words don't come. Mia, however, isn't done. She doesn't wait for his apology or his reaction. She simply turns and walks away, her head held high, leaving behind a room full of stunned silence. The tension in the air is palpable. As Mia continues with her duties, the billionaire CEO sits frozen, his confidence shattered. He doesn't know it yet, but the tables have already turned. This moment, this one simple exchange, will change everything. And it all started with a mockery he didn't expect, and a reply that left him speechless. Stay with us to see how this incredible story unfolds, because sometimes the quietest voices carry the most weight. I have to admit, I wasn't expecting that. The words I said to her, those words I've used 1,000 times to belittle people, just bounced right off her like they meant nothing. The look in her eyes, steady and unshaken, told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't afraid of me. But the worst part? She didn't need to say anything more. She had already won. The silence in the room was deafening as I sat back in my chair, the smug grin on my face evaporating. The laughter from my colleagues had died, and for the first time, I felt small. She had responded in my own language. And she didn't just speak it. She spoke it fluently, perfectly. She was no ordinary waitress. And for a moment, I wondered just how many others I had underestimated. As I sat there, unable to speak, the energy in the room shifted. No longer was I the center of attention. Now, all eyes were on her. Mia, the waitress who had taken my words and turned them against me. She was nothing like I had assumed, and I was beginning to see that maybe, just maybe, I had misjudged her completely. After a few minutes of awkward silence, I cleared my throat. "You know, I didn't expect that," I finally managed to say. "You've caught me off guard." I wanted to add something more, an apology, perhaps, but the words felt heavy on my tongue. Instead, I just stared at her. Mia didn't respond immediately. She didn't need to. She simply nodded once, acknowledging the moment before she turned and walked back to her station, like she had just made a point and now it was time to move on. But for me, it wasn't over. I couldn't just let this go. I had built my career by intimidating others, by making them feel small and insignificant. That had been my power. But Mia had shown me that there were different kinds of power, ones that didn't require a suit or millions of dollars. I watched her for the rest of the evening, trying to make sense of what had just happened. She moved through the restaurant with a grace I hadn't noticed before, serving drinks, clearing plates, all while maintaining that same quiet strength. It was clear now that Mia wasn't just another employee. She wasn't just a part of the background. She was someone to be reckoned with. And as the night wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just learned a very valuable lesson, one I wasn't sure I wanted to admit. By the time dessert was served, my mind was racing. I had to know more about her. What kind of person was she? How had she learned to speak Cantonese so fluently? Who was Mia really? I leaned over to one of the other guests at my table, someone I knew well. "Do you know anything about the waitress?" I asked quietly, hoping no one else would overhear. He glanced over at her, his eyes narrowing as he tried to place her. "Mia," he asked. "Yeah, I've heard she's from a pretty impressive family. Something about her mother being an academic. But I don't know much beyond that." That was the first I had heard of it. Mia, a waitress, from an impressive family? It didn't make sense. And it bothered me that I had been so blind to it all. The more I thought about it, the more it felt like I had missed something. But I wasn't about to let it go. The night had to end at some point, but I couldn't shake the feeling that my conversation with Mia wasn't over. I had to apologize. I had to know who she was, and why she had chosen to work in a place like this when she could clearly do so much more. I stood up, my decision made. As I walked toward the kitchen, I saw her again, standing behind the counter, cleaning a glass with focused precision. This was it. This was my moment. I was going to approach her, offer my apology, and hope that she would let me make things right. But as I approached, she turned and looked at me. There was no animosity in her gaze, only the quiet strength I had come to expect. I opened my mouth, but before I could speak, Mia beat me to it. "I'm sorry, sir, but I don't have time for this," she said, her tone polite but firm. "I have a job to do." And just like that, she turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, once again speechless. It was a humbling moment. I had expected her to react differently. I had expected her to be grateful for my apology, to seek validation from me in some way. But instead, she had made it clear that her worth was not dependent on me or anyone else. She knew her value. And that made me realize, perhaps for the first time in my life, that true power wasn't something you flaunted or demanded. It was something you quietly carried within yourself. And Mia? Mia had it in spades. As I returned to my seat, I couldn't help but think about how much I had underestimated her, and how much I had to learn from someone like her. I watched her walk away, and it hit me. There was no apology, no moment of weakness, no rush for her to prove anything to me. It was clear that Mia didn't need validation. She wasn't looking for recognition or praise, especially not from someone like me. As I sat back down at the table, the sense of powerlessness I had never experienced before began to gnaw at me. I was a billionaire CEO, a man who built an empire, who made deals that moved entire markets. But in that moment, I felt like nothing. I felt small, and I didn't like it. The conversation at the table resumed, but I could barely focus. My mind kept wandering back to Mia, the waitress who had so effortlessly humiliated me. But it wasn't just the fact that she spoke Cantonese. No, it was the way she carried herself, the grace, the quiet strength that was so much more powerful than anything I had ever achieved. It was something I couldn't buy with all my wealth. I knew I had to learn more about her. I had to understand how someone like her had ended up here, working as a waitress when she could clearly be so much more. I had to make things right. I waited for the perfect moment, and when it finally came, I stood up and walked toward the kitchen. As I approached the counter, Mia was there, cleaning glasses with the same calm, focused precision I had noticed earlier. Her hands moved like clockwork, and I could see how her composure had a ripple effect on the room around her. No one could ignore her, not even the guests who came in for a simple meal. I stood for a moment, unsure of how to start. But before I could say anything, Mia turned around. She looked at me with those same steady eyes, her face unreadable, but her posture firm. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked, her tone polite but not eager. I knew I had to apologize, but it wasn't enough just to say the words. I needed to show her I understood, that I respected her. I took a deep breath, my voice steady but genuine. "Mia, I owe you an apology," I said, keeping my gaze locked with hers. "What I said earlier, it was wrong. I underestimated you, and I'm sorry for that." She didn't respond immediately, and I couldn't tell what she was thinking. For a brief moment, the silence between us stretched, thick with unspoken words. But then she nodded, just once, acknowledging. "My apology." "It's all right," she said, her voice calm. "You don't have to apologize. You don't owe me anything." And just like that, the moment passed. Mia turned back to her task, her hands once again moving with that quiet grace, as if the conversation we'd just had was no more important than any other. But for me, it wasn't just another conversation. It was a revelation. I had thought I knew everything about power, but Mia had shown me that true power wasn't about money, status, or authority. It was about self-respect, integrity, and the ability to remain calm and composed in the face of adversity. I realized that Mia was far more than just a waitress. She was a woman who understood something I hadn't yet learned, that the most important thing you can own in this world is your own dignity. As I turned to walk away, I couldn't help but think about how much I had just learned from someone I had once dismissed. And I knew, deep down, that I would never forget this lesson. Over the next few days, the incident at the restaurant continued to linger in my mind. I couldn't stop thinking about Mia, about how she had handled me with such grace, how she had taught me a lesson in humility without even trying. I had to find out more about her. So, I did what any billionaire CEO would do when they wanted answers. I had my team look into her background. What I found surprised me even more. Mia had graduated at the top of her class from one of the best universities in the country. She was fluent in 3 languages, including Cantonese, and had worked for top-tier companies before choosing this job at the restaurant. But despite all of that, she chose to work as a waitress, as if she had something more important in mind than the career I had assumed she would have. It became clear to me that Mia wasn't just any woman. She was someone who had made a choice, a deliberate decision to live life on her own terms. She didn't need anyone's approval, and that was the kind of person I wanted to get to know. I had to find a way to show her that I respected her, that I recognized the value she held, and that I was no longer the same man who had mocked her at that dinner. The next time I saw Mia, I knew things would be different. I didn't know what would happen between us, but I knew that whatever it was going to change my life. And perhaps, just perhaps, she would teach me even more about what it really meant to be powerful. I didn't know what to expect when I walked into the restaurant the next day. The events of the past week had been playing in my mind nonstop. I thought I knew power. I thought I had mastered it. But Mia, the waitress, had shown me that true power wasn't about money or control. It wasn't about making people feel small. It was about standing tall, no matter the circumstances. I had to see her again, to understand more about the woman who had quietly humiliated me without saying a word. When I walked in, the restaurant was as bustling as always. The familiar sounds of clinking glasses, soft jazz music, and the hum of conversation filled the air. But today, the place felt different. Today, I was aware of everything around me, particularly Mia. As I walked toward the back of the restaurant, I saw her in the corner, preparing drinks for another table. She didn't notice me at first, and I took the opportunity to just watch her for a moment. She moved with the same grace as before, but there was something different about her today. Something stronger. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to approach her. But then she turned, caught my eye, and smiled. The same calm smile, the same poise. No sign of resentment. No sign of superiority. Just quiet strength. It was then that I realized, Mia wasn't just a waitress. She was a force. And it was time for me to acknowledge that. I walked toward her slowly, my footsteps heavy with the weight of the words I needed to say. "Mia," I began, my voice steady but unsure. "I need to apologize again for what happened that night. I was out of line, and I should never have spoken to you the way I did." She didn't interrupt me, just watched me quietly, waiting for me to continue. I've been thinking about what happened ever since, I said, taking a deep breath. And I realized something. You're not just a waitress. You're someone who has more dignity and strength than most people I know, including myself. And I'm sorry I didn't see that before. I saw a flicker of something in her eyes, but it wasn't surprise. It wasn't even satisfaction. It was understanding. She nodded slightly, as if acknowledging my apology, but didn't speak. I'd like to make it right, I continued, feeling a surge of determination. I want to offer you a job. Something more than this. Something that recognizes your talents and your potential. You don't deserve to be stuck in a job where you're overlooked. Mia remained silent for a moment, and for a second, I thought she might turn me down. But then she surprised me again. I appreciate the offer, she said softly, her voice calm and measured. But I'm exactly where I need to be right now. My heart sank. I didn't expect that answer. I thought she would want more, that she would want to move up, to escape this job. But she didn't. I've worked hard to get here, she explained, her gaze steady on me. And I'm not looking for validation or a way out. I'm happy with what I do. I'm good at it. And that's enough for me. There was no bitterness in her words, no resentment. Just the same quiet strength I had noticed before. I was struck by how grounded she was, how sure of herself. How many people in my position could say the same? How many people with the power I had would choose to be content with what they had, not because they couldn't have more, but because they didn't need more? I stood there, speechless, for a moment. What she said hit me harder than any business deal I had ever closed. She wasn't like me. She didn't need to prove her worth. She knew it. And that, more than anything else, was the most powerful thing I had ever seen. You're right, I finally said, my voice low. You don't need me to make things right. You already have everything you need. She smiled then, just a little, as if to say she understood. And just like that, the moment passed. Mia turned back to her work, and I stood there for a moment longer, watching her. I wasn't sure what had just happened between us, but I knew one thing for sure. I would never forget this moment. And in a way, it had changed me. It had made me realize that there were things more important than power, more important than wealth. There was dignity. There was self-respect. And Mia, in her quiet way, had shown me what it really meant to live with both. I left the restaurant that day feeling lighter than I had in years, knowing that I had just learned a lesson that no amount of money could ever teach me. I couldn't get Mia out of my mind. Every time I tried to focus on my work, her face, her words, her quiet strength kept replaying in my thoughts. I had spent my entire life in the fast lane, building my empire, making deals, earning respect from others based on my power. But Mia had shown me something I had never truly understood. She had shown me what it meant to have real power, the kind that came from within, not from the money or status that I had come to rely on. I wanted to understand her more. I needed to know how she had arrived at this point, where she had this sense of calm and strength that I, with all my wealth and success, lacked. So, I decided to make an offer I never thought I would. The next day, I returned to the restaurant, determined to find a way to connect with Mia, to learn from her. I had never felt so unsure about what I was about to do. I was used to being the one with the power, the one who held all the cards. But Mia? She was different. She didn't play by the rules I understood. She didn't need my validation. And yet, I still had to try. When I walked into the restaurant, Mia was at the back, preparing a tray of drinks. She looked up as I approached, her expression neutral but not unfriendly. "Mr. Caldwell," she said politely, acknowledging me with a simple nod. It was like she already knew what I wanted. "Mia," I said, my voice slightly shaky for reasons I couldn't fully explain. "I need to ask you something. Something I've been thinking about for a long time." She set down the tray and gave me her full attention, waiting for me to continue. "I want to offer you something. A position at my company. I want you to join us, not as a waitress, but as a valued member of the team. I've seen what you can do, and I don't want you to feel like you're wasting your potential." There was a pause. For a moment, I thought she would turn me down, that she would reject me as she had before. But she didn't. She just stood there, looking at me, her expression unreadable. Finally, she spoke. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, her voice steady and calm. "I've made it clear before that I don't need validation from anyone. What I do here, it's not about what I can get from you or anyone else. It's about what I choose to give." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to argue, to tell her that she was worth so much more than this job, that she deserved better. But then, I realized something. She was right. She didn't need me. She didn't need anyone to tell her what she was worth. And that was exactly what made her different from everyone else I had ever known. I understand, I said finally, the words coming out quieter than I had intended. But I have to say this. You've already changed my perspective on everything. You've shown me what real strength looks like, and for that, I'm grateful. You didn't have to do that. You didn't have to stand up to me, but you did. And that takes more courage than I've seen in a long time. She smiled, just a little, and it was enough to make me feel like I had just made the biggest breakthrough of my life. Thank you, I said again, meaning it this time. I didn't know what would happen after this, but I knew one thing for sure. Mia had changed me. She had made me see that true power wasn't about having more than everyone else. It was about knowing who you were and staying true to yourself, no matter who tried to knock you down. As I left the restaurant that day, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, a sense of peace. It wasn't a peace that came from success or wealth. It was a peace that came from understanding that power wasn't everything, and sometimes, the most important thing in life was finding your own way, without needing anyone else to tell you what your worth was. Mia had already figured that out. And maybe, just maybe, I was finally starting to understand it too. I walked into the restaurant a few weeks later, unsure of what to expect. After our last conversation, Mia and I hadn't spoken much. I respected her decision, but there was a part of me that wanted to do more, to offer her a chance to show the world what she could do. But I had learned something important in those last few days. Mia didn't need anyone to see her worth. She already knew it. The restaurant was busier than usual, the noise of clinking glasses and soft conversations filling the air. I walked past the tables, my eyes scanning for Mia. It didn't take long for me to spot her, moving gracefully between the guests, carrying a tray, her eyes focused, her posture upright. She was the same as always, calm, composed, and completely in control. She didn't see me at first, and I didn't want to interrupt her. I watched as she moved effortlessly through the crowd, her movements fluid, precise. But this time, I noticed something different. There was a confidence in the way she carried herself that hadn't been there before. It was subtle, but it was there. She had always been confident, but now it was clear she had nothing left to prove. I waited for her to finish with her table before approaching her. She caught my eye as she walked by, and for a moment, it felt like the world around us faded away. "Mia," I said, my voice steady. "Can we talk for a minute?" She nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her lips. "Sure," she replied, walking toward the back where we could talk without disturbing the other guests. I followed her, trying to gather my thoughts. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said that day," I began, "and I wanted to tell you that I respect you. More than you know." Mia didn't respond immediately. She just stood there, looking at me with those steady eyes of hers, waiting for me to continue. "I've spent my life building this empire, thinking that power came from wealth and influence," I said, my voice quieter now. "But you've shown me that true power comes from something else entirely. It comes from within. It comes from knowing your own worth and standing firm in it. And that's what you've done. You've taught me that." There was a pause, and for a moment, I thought she might say something, but she didn't. She just stood there, her expression calm and thoughtful. Finally, she spoke. "I didn't do anything special, Mr. Caldwell," she said softly. "I just decided to stop waiting for someone else to tell me what I'm worth. I've always known." I could feel the weight of her words settle on me. She was right. She hadn't done anything special. She had just decided to live her life on her own terms, without needing anyone else's approval. And that was what made her different from the rest of us. "I wanted to thank you for your offer," she continued, "but I'm happy with what I do. I'm not looking for anything else. I don't need to prove myself to anyone." I nodded, understanding. There was a part of me that had hoped she would change her mind, that she would take my offer and come work with me. But I knew, deep down, that she was right. She didn't need me. She didn't need anyone to tell her what she was capable of. She already knew. "I get it," I said quietly, "and I respect that. I just wanted you to know that you've made an impact on me. You've made me see things differently." Mia smiled, a small, knowing smile. "I'm glad," she said simply. We stood there for a moment, both of us acknowledging the unspoken understanding between us. Then, Mia turned back to the task at hand, picking up her tray with the same effortless grace. As she walked away, I couldn't help but feel a sense of peace. I had come here hoping to offer her something more, but what I had learned from her was worth more than anything I could have given her. Mia had shown me that power wasn't something you earned. It was something you claimed for yourself. And I would never forget that lesson. I walked into the restaurant the next week, feeling a strange sense of anticipation. It wasn't the usual rush I felt before a meeting or business deal. No, this was different. This was about Mia. After everything that had happened between us, after the way she had so effortlessly changed my view on power, I knew I couldn't let this go. I had to know more about her. I had to understand how someone like Mia, who didn't need anyone's approval, could still make such a profound impact on someone like me. I had learned so much in such a short time, but I was certain that there was still more for me to understand. As I entered, the familiar hum of the restaurant filled the air, plates clinking, soft jazz playing, the low murmur of conversation. But today, it felt different. The energy was different. Mia was different. She wasn't just another waitress anymore. She had become someone I couldn't ignore. I spotted her at the back, balancing a tray full of drinks, moving as gracefully as always. Her eyes flicked up and met mine as I approached, and for a second, I felt that same sense of calm wash over me. There was something about her presence that grounded me. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, her voice still steady and composed. "Good to see you again." I couldn't help but smile. "Mia," I replied, my voice more confident this time. "I wanted to talk to you. I've been thinking a lot about what you said last time." She nodded, waiting for me to continue. "I want to learn more about you," I said, unsure if I was making the right choice by asking. "I've been in this business world my entire life, and I thought I knew what was important: money, power, influence. But you've made me realize that there's so much more to it than that. So much more to you. I want to understand who you are, what drives you, what makes you you." Mia didn't respond immediately, and I wondered if I had overstepped. But after a moment of silence, she spoke. "Mr. Caldwell, I didn't come here to teach anyone lessons," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "I'm not here to show you anything. I'm just doing my job. I'm just living my life." Her words struck me. She wasn't looking for recognition or validation. She didn't need to prove anything. She had already figured it out. She had already figured out the most important lesson: how to live without waiting for someone else to tell you your worth. I felt a pang of guilt, realizing that in all my years of success, I had been so focused on validation that I had forgotten what it meant to truly live for yourself. "I understand," I said, my voice softer now. "I think I've been lost in my own world, chasing things that I thought mattered. But I've realized that those things don't bring peace. They don't bring happiness. What you've shown me is that there's so much more to life than that." Mia gave me a small, knowing smile. "It's not about what you have, Mr. Caldwell," she said. "It's about who you are when everything else is stripped away. It's about finding your own peace." I stood there, processing her words. There was something powerful in her simplicity, something that seemed to radiate from her. She wasn't chasing anything. She wasn't striving to prove herself. She was already whole. And in that moment, I realized that I had spent my entire life chasing external validation: money, power, status, when what I really needed was to understand myself, to find my own inner peace. Mia had something I had been looking for my whole life, but I had never known it until she pointed it out. I didn't know if she realized how much she had changed me, but I knew that I couldn't leave without thanking her. "Mia, I don't think I'll ever fully understand how you do it," I said, my voice filled with admiration. "But I hope one day I can be like you. Just content. Just at peace." She smiled again, that same calm smile, as if she had always known the answer. "It's not about being like someone else," she said. "It's about being true to yourself. That's the hardest part, and the most important part." I nodded, feeling a sense of gratitude swell inside me. I had come here to offer her something, but what I was really walking away with was a lesson that would stay with me forever. I had learned that the most powerful thing a person could have wasn't money, status, or influence. It was peace with who they were. Mia didn't need anything from me. She had already given me everything I needed. And as I walked out of the restaurant, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: hope. Mia had shown me that it was never too late to change, to stop chasing things that didn't matter, and to start living with purpose and authenticity. I didn't know where life would take me from here, but I knew that Mia had set me on a path I never would have found on my own. I had spent weeks reflecting on everything Mia had taught me. I never expected a single encounter with a waitress to change my perspective so profoundly, but it had. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how much I had been chasing the wrong things in life. Money, status, and power. And Mia? She had shown me that the real strength was in knowing yourself and staying true to who you are, no matter what the world expected of you. As I walked into the restaurant again, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, a sense of clarity. The buzzing atmosphere of the place didn't feel like it used to. It didn't feel like the world I had once dominated. This time, it felt like something else entirely, like a place where real connections could be made, where people weren't just there for business or status. It felt personal. Mia was there, as always, working with the same quiet grace she had before. She moved between tables, her focus unwavering, her movements effortless. As I watched her, I realized just how much I had underestimated her. I had once thought she was just a part of the background, someone who served drinks and cleared plates. But she was more than that. She had a presence that commanded attention without ever asking for it. And I found myself wondering, what would happen if I tried to change? What would happen if I stopped chasing everything that didn't matter and focused on becoming a person who truly understood the value of relationships and inner peace? I walked up to her, feeling that familiar mix of nerves and admiration. "Mia," I said, my voice steady. "I need to talk to you." She turned, her expression as calm as ever. "Of course, Mr. Caldwell," she said, her voice still polite, but with an undertone of warmth that I hadn't noticed before. "Is everything okay?" I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. "I've been thinking a lot lately," I began, "and I realize now that I've spent my life chasing the wrong things. I've been focused on power, money, and control. But you've shown me something else. Something I didn't know I needed." Mia raised an eyebrow slightly, not in surprise, but in curiosity. "And what is that?" she asked. I smiled a little, finally feeling the weight lift off my shoulders. "You've shown me what it means to have true strength, to be at peace with who you are. I've spent so much of my life building an empire, but I've forgotten what really matters. People. Real connections. I've learned more from you than I have from any business meeting or deal I've ever made." There was a long silence as Mia looked at me, her eyes unwavering. Finally, she nodded, as if accepting my words but not needing to say anything in return. "I'm glad you figured that out," she said simply. "It's easy to get lost in what the world tells you is important. But in the end, it's the people around you who matter most." I stood there, listening to her, the weight of her words sinking in deeper than anything I had ever heard before. She wasn't giving me advice or telling me what to do. She was simply speaking the truth in a way that made it impossible to ignore. "I want to do more," I said quietly, my voice filled with sincerity. "I want to change. I want to focus on the things that really matter, not the things I've been chasing all these years." Mia gave me that same quiet smile, the one that had always seemed so knowing. "Change comes when you stop looking for it outside and start finding it within yourself," she said. "That's where real power is. It's not about what you have. It's about who you are." I left the restaurant that day with a sense of peace I had never known before. I had come there to offer Mia something, to offer her a better life. But in reality, she had already given me everything I needed. I didn't know exactly how my life would unfold from that point on, but I knew one thing for sure. Mia had given me a lesson that I would never forget. It was time to focus on the things that really mattered, the connections I had with people, the values I held, and the peace I had long overlooked. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally on the right path. I had been out of the office for the entire week, something I had never done before. But today, as I walked back through the doors of my company, I felt a new kind of energy. The past weeks had shown me that everything I had been focusing on, building this empire, climbing to the top, and commanding respect through wealth and authority, wasn't as important as I thought. What mattered more was the realization that true power lies in understanding who you are, in finding peace with yourself, and in recognizing the value of the people around you. I had Mia to thank for that. Since our last conversation, I had been reflecting on everything she had taught me. I thought back to the way she had handled me, the way she had shown me that true strength wasn't about who had the most money or the loudest voice in the room. It was about staying grounded, about having integrity and knowing your worth without needing anyone else to tell you. I wasn't the same person I had been when I first met Mia. The days of rushing through life, making decisions based on pride or fear of losing control, were over. I had started listening more, not just to the people around me, but to myself. I had begun to notice things I had ignored before, small details, moments that mattered. I found myself talking more to the employees in my company, asking them about their lives, their challenges, and their ideas. And I was learning, truly learning, from them. I realized that every person, no matter their position or background, had something valuable to offer. And as I stood in the lobby of my office building, I thought back to the last conversation I had with Mia. She had told me that change comes from within. She had shown me that the most important thing wasn't what I had or what I controlled, but who I was when no one was watching. And I had finally understood it. It wasn't just a lesson, it was a transformation. That evening, after work, I went to the restaurant again. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I knew I had to see Mia one last time. I walked in, the familiar sounds of the restaurant greeting me, but today it felt different. It wasn't just a place I was visiting. It was a place where I had learned something profound, something that was changing the course of my life. I spotted Mia immediately. She was walking between the tables, her focus on her work, but there was a calm in her presence that stood out more than ever. She wasn't just a waitress. She was someone who had found peace in herself, someone who didn't need validation from anyone else. As I walked toward her, I felt a strange sense of gratitude. "Mia," I said, and she turned, recognizing me instantly. She smiled, that same calm smile that had been so powerful from the first time I met her. "Mr. Caldwell," she said politely, "good to see you again. I just wanted to thank you," I said, my voice sincere, "for everything. You've changed my life in ways I didn't expect, and I don't think I can fully express how much I appreciate it." Mia's smile softened, but she didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Her presence was enough. "I don't need anything in return," she said simply, "but I appreciate the kind words. I'm glad you found your peace." Those words, so simple and yet so powerful, stayed with me long after I left the restaurant that night. I realized that Mia didn't just change the way I saw the world. She had changed the way I saw myself. I had spent so long looking for answers outside of myself, seeking validation in things that didn't matter. But now I understood. The answer had always been within me. And with Mia's help, I had found it. The next morning, I made a decision. I didn't want to go back to the same life I had been living before. I didn't want to chase after things that didn't matter. I wanted to be more like Mia, someone who knew who she was, someone who lived with integrity and purpose. As I sat at my desk in my office that day, I realized that true success wasn't about what you could build or what you could control. It was about who you became in the process. And thanks to Mia, I had finally started that journey. I didn't know where it would take me, but I knew it was the right path. And that was all that mattered.